everyone, welcome back to the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. This week we're going to be working on this piece that's behind me, and it's really different, and this is something that I crave a little bit sometimes, is just working on pieces that are different than something I've done before in the past, and this one absolutely meets that criteria. This was brought to me by a customer, and it's a little probably wash stand. It's got a bowl here, it's got a mirror that goes with it. All these little pieces just need to be tightened up, but I'm going to give this a really pretty blended finish. She has a transfer that she chose that we're going to use for our color inspiration. So I'm going to pull my color choices from that transfer. I'm going to try to redo this bowl to modernize it a little bit. The motif that's on here, I don't think is going to go with our final finish. So I'm going to bring this bowl up to date. I'm going to try using a little bit of resin along with my transfer, some color, but I think this wash stand will be really pretty and have a lot of character. And it'll be different. So it's gonna, kind of refresh my abilities a little bit and give me something new to try. And I actually have never seen these before. And then as soon as she brought me this one, I ended up seeing another one. So they are out there and they are available, and it's a really unique piece. So don't be afraid to pick stuff like that up and kind of just, I don't know, change it up a little every once in a while from doing your usual dresser or, a cabinet or any furniture piece like that. And try some of these little different things. So we'll do some different techniques on this one, a little bit of blending, some transfers, some resin, and let's see where this goes. Here's where I started on this piece. It was a little rickety and all of the spindles needed to be tightened really well. They just screwed into each other. So I made sure and I did that first. And then I needed to give this a thorough cleaning. I also had to sand down some spots that were a little uneven before this was ready to go. The next thing I did was spray the entire thing in a primer. Here is that bowl. It's very unique, but this design is not going to go. Here's the transfer that my customer chose. I think we're going to go for kind of a Day of the Dead theme. I have never applied a transfer onto a bowl, onto a concave surface like this, but I'm going to give it a try, and I'll tell you right now that it actually came out really well. So I needed to seam these together in the center. This is where the transfer naturally seams the pieces together, but I need to make sure they all line up while also being on a concave surface. My bowl has 2 coats of Resin primer. This is in white, and I'm just going to use that for my base. It ended up being a great base for this transfer. I didn't add any paint over top. I'm just going to go ahead and use that white primer. It was a great color. So the first thing I do when I'm applying this transfer to the concave surface is I made sure to match up anywhere that the transfer seams together. Those are the most important parts. And then I'm going to cut away the clear backing sheet as I go to relieve some of the tension on the flat surface. I'm trying to make a flat transfer go onto a rounded surface, and so I had to do it slowly and one part at a time. Cutting away that clear backing sheet as I went just helped remove some of the surface tension so that I could make this transfer lay flat. And then once I had all the pieces down, I used my finger to smooth out any areas that weren't perfectly flat and then burnish them out just using a rag. I did cut around the edges of this transfer to sort of isolate the skull and some of the florals onto the center of my bowl, and this is the design it came out with. It ended up turning out beautifully. With the transfer all applied to my bowl, we'll come back to that later and apply the sealer to it, but let's go ahead and pay attention to this base. So I ended up using 2 colors on this base. It's Graphic Slate and River Rock from Resin Paint, and I pulled my color inspiration directly from the transfer itself. My customer had told me that she liked the blues in that, so I took those blues and I found my closest paint colors to match them. But I'm going to do some blending up these spindles. So I'm doing 2 coats exactly the same. My piece already has a base coat on it, but we're going to repeat it right now, and I'm going to talk you through how I got that base coat on there. I applied the darker color, which is the Graphic Slate, to the top of those spindles, and then a little bit of the River Rock to the center. And then I'm going to take a clean, dry brush, and I'm going to smooth those colors together where they meet up. And that lets the spindles look like they have a lighter section in the middle and a little bit darker towards the top and bottom. I'm going to repeat the same process on the base using those same 2 colors of River Rock and Graphic Slate from Resin, and I'm going to add a highlight into the base of this wash stand. I'm also going to use some of the scraps for the transfer that I put onto the bowl, and I'm going to apply these down here onto the base too. Now this is one of the top reasons that I use Resin Chalk Synthesis paint. You guys are going to see here how easily blendable this paint is. edges. And this isn't the case for every paint that's out there. All-in-one style paints are not great for blending. Clay-based paints are not my favorite for blending, but this is a great paint for blending colors together, which is a major part of my painting style. And so I have to choose a paint that's superior for this. And Wysal is easily one of those. The colors are also highly pigmented, so I get a choice of these beautiful, rich colors. It's a nice, durable paint, and I love the focus of quality that the owners of the company have on their paint products. So keep that in mind when you're blending a paint together, that not all paints blend the same. And if you're going to be doing a look like this, the type of paint that you use is hugely important. Wysal is just an easy choice for me, and that's why you see me use it a lot. Once I find the one that works great, I'm going to stick with it. So what I did here is apply that river rock to the center, a little bit of the darker graphic slate around the outer edges, and then I'm using a little bit of water in that clean dry brush to just softly brush those colors together. Now let's go back and pay attention to this bowl. I ended up painting this bowl live on camera, and I used mandarina, which is kind of an orange color. I pulled my color inspiration from some flowers that were in the transfer. But it was a little too bright orange, so I'm going over it with a color called Fireside, and I absolutely love this color. But I ended up changing it again. So you're going to notice in the final video that the color I ended up with is actually called Raspberry Beret from Wysal. But I wanted to show you the process that I used to paint this bowl. I put it onto one of my stools and I use it as sort of a turntable and was able to go around this round surface. It made really quick work of it. And then I brushed out those brush strokes to just make it nice and smooth. This color Fireside is absolutely gorgeous, and it did tie in with some of the flower colors that are inside the bowl, but when I put the transfer onto the bottom of the wash stand, I noticed that the bottom didn't have any of this orange color, so I felt like it was a little bit out of place, whereas the Raspberry Beret appeared in both the bowl and on the base of the piece, so it seemed to tie in a little bit better. All right, it's time to seal up that bowl, and I've never done this before, but I'm going to apply some resin onto the rounded surface of the bowl. I'm mixing up some amazing Clear Cast Plus resin, and I chose this because I'm applying it over a white surface. Remember, I used the white primer underneath that transfer, and the Clear Cast Plus has UV resistance, which means it's going to resist yellowing over time, and I definitely don't want this to discolor. I mixed up a little bit of excess resin, and that's because I'm working on multiple projects at one time. And so I went ahead and poured some into my bowl, and I'm just going to use my gloved hand to smooth it over the surface of this bowl. I do have excess resin in the bottom of this bowl, and that's because I'm going to use it to make sure I get full coverage when I'm smoothing it over the entire surface. But I then am going to turn the bowl over and let that excess drip out because I don't want it to pool down at the bottom of the bowl. I just want enough to cover the surface without actually settling in the bottom. There are thick resins that are made for going on to vertical surfaces. I'm not using one here. That would have been helpful. But I can use regular resin for this, and it ended up working really, really well. So I'm going to set this aside and turn it upside down for that excess resin to drip out. And then I'm going to use the excess that was inside the bowl to just seal this Lazy Susan. This was just a Dollar Tree Lazy Susan that I picked up, but I can put some resin over the top of it, and it'll make it a lot more usable and wipeable if I actually use it for food. I'm doing the same thing and just using my gloved hand to smooth it out over the top of the Lazy Susan, and then I want to make sure I cover the edges as well. I need a little bit more, but I still had plenty left in that cup, so I can pour a little bit more on there. This resin has about a 45-minute open time that I can work with it before it really starts setting up, so it was more than enough time to work on these two small projects together. I made sure that I had two small projects because I knew that I was going to need to let the resin drip out of the bowl afterwards, and I didn't want to waste it. I ended up using the rest of this resin on the top of a jewelry box, so nothing went to waste. After my resin is all poured and dripped out, I'm going to go ahead and use my torch and blow out any bubbles from the resin. You can use a heat gun for this, but I find that the torch works much better. I want to hold this at a distance and keep it moving so that I don't end up burning my resin. That can cause it to amber. The bowl turned out beautifully, you guys. I'm thrilled with how it came out. I applied the transfer to the base as well, and this is the finished product. Everything was sealed in 2 coats of Wysal matte varnish, including the underside of this bowl. This one is complete. I hope you guys enjoyed this transformation, a piece that's a little bit different than the norm. I think it came out really cool. You guys can find links for everything I used in the description for this post. As always, you can find more Brush by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and on my website at brushbybrandy.com. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll click that subscribe button for weekly painting tutorials here at Brush by Brandy on YouTube.